Okay, so for this video, we're going to be talking about mortgage and how do we pay down a mortgage and some important calculations in paying down a mortgage. The mortgage we're starting with here is $120,000 borrowed. So after the down payment, $120,000 is the value of the mortgage. And it's going to be paid over 30 years, monthly payments. And that's kind of understood with a mortgage. And then at 4.5% fixed rate, so 4.5% interest. The first thing we're asked to do is find the value of the monthly payment. How much are we going to be paying in? And then from that, we can fairly quickly calculate the total interest of the loan just by taking that number of monthly payments, multiplying it, or the value of those payments, multiplying it by the number of months, and then taking $120,000, the value of the loan, out from that. So how much did we pay? And then take $120,000 away from that. The difference will be, what's the interest? How much did I pay to rent that $120,000 for 30 years? Or portions of that, more accurately, portions of that $120,000 for 30 years. Portions of it we only rented for a month. Okay, how do we do that? Well, we use our payment formula. And our payment formula is PMT. And remember, our book uses PMT as a single variable for payment. And so we're going to say principal rate divided by number of periods in the year. So that's going to be 12 for us since it's monthly payments. Divided by, then bracket 1 minus 1 plus r over n raised to the negative nt. Close our bracket. Okay, so if that's my formula, I got to start figuring out what my values are. My R is 4.5%, but I never write that as a percentage. I always write that as a ratio, so 0.045. My N is number of payments per period, so that's going to be 12. My T is my number of years, so that's going to be 30. And then my principal is the value of the loan, so that'll be $120,000. Right now I'm just writing these out as numbers so that we can put them into the formula. Okay, well, let's put that into the formula. I have 120,000, and that'll be times R, my 0.045 divided by 12. Then that whole thing is divided by 1 minus 1 plus my rate, my 0.045 divided by 12. So it's my periodic rate, my monthly rate in this case, minus 12 times 30, number of periods. The brackets around here sort of aren't necessary for the way that we're visualizing this, but they are necessary for when we type them into a calculator. So I do continue to write them down to remind us to put them there when we type this into a calculator to actually find out what is our payment. All right, so when I turn on my calculator, type in 120,000. All right, I'm going to multiply that by, I got my 0.045 divided by 12. Take my cursor to the right one so that I can divide that whole thing. And now I open the parentheses, I open the brackets to tell it to keep this entire thing in the denominator. Otherwise, it'd only do the first thing, the first term to the right, and then that would be what was divided by. All right, so now I do 1. That first term is 1, so it would really just divide by 1 and it wouldn't do anything. But the thing about the parentheses is it brings in this minus parentheses 1 plus 0.045 divided by 12. And then that whole thing is raised to the negative 12 times 30, total number of periods, and then close parentheses on the denominator. All right, so we hit enter on that. And that gives me a monthly payment of $608. We'll go ahead and round to $608. Okay, so that found me my monthly payment. That's kind of half of what we were asked to do at the beginning. The second part is find the total interest of the loan. And I rambled on about that a little bit at the beginning, but the total interest is basically the difference between what I paid in and what I borrowed, right? Because I'm going to pay in more than I borrow. That's the whole idea is that I'm paying them money to rent their money. It's just I'm paying it over time. Okay, so the way I'm going to figure that out is I'm going to say that I'm paying in $608. Let's change colors, just because that seems like a good idea. It's a different calculation. We'll put some separation here. So I'm paying in $608, and I'm paying that 12 times a year for 30 years. And then from that, I want to subtract the value of the loan, which is at $120,000. And so that will be the interest paid. Will equal the difference between those values. All right, well, let's go ahead and get the intermediate value of what we paid in, just so that we kind of have a feel for the different numbers. 608 times 12 times 30. So I paid in $218,880. So it's going to be $218,880. Then minus the 120. And then, what do I get in the end? 218,880 minus 120. You give me a total of 98,880. All right. Resuming after a quick little pause. Had a student come to the door, and I'm doing these during office hours, so students come first. All right. Where were we? We've calculated the amount of interest that we've paid in, and that's actually, it's an astounding amount of interest compared to the principal, right? Because, I mean, we're talking about nearly $100,000 of interest on a loan that was only $120,000. And the whole idea is that we've borrowed it over such a significant amount of time, over that 30 years, that our rental money, because we've rented it for so long, the rental starts to get very expensive. Okay, well, let's take a look at, so that was part A. That gave me my monthly payments, and that gave me my total interest of the loan. So those were the first two values that we found there. And now we want this, oh boy, that's a big name, big phrase, amortization schedule. Amortization schedule. I've also heard it called an amortization table for the first 3 months of the loan. Well, amortization table, amortization schedule, it basically means to describe how we pay off the loan. There's actually something kind of cathartic in the roots of the word to amortize or amortization. Typically, it can mean to kill off. And so we're kind of killing off our mortgage or killing off our loan. And if you've ever had a mortgage or had a loan that you needed to pay down like that, there are days that's a very, very cathartic thing to think about. Okay, so we're taking out our loan. Here, we'll sanitize it a little bit. We're taking out our loan, or amortization schedule, and we want to figure out how that works. Well, the way we're going to do this, we're going to make a table where we have our payment number as the first column of our table. The interest part of the payment for that month is in the first column, or the second column here. The principal part of the payment is in that third column. And then the loan balance at the end of that payment. So after this payment has been made, what is the loan balance? Now you might think, well, the loan balance, well, I made a payment in, and so all of that payment goes towards the loan balance, and so when I make my payment of $608, my $120,000 minus 608 is my next loan balance. It would be wonderful if it worked out that way, but the problem is that ignores the rental. that ignores the amount of money that you're paying. It ignores the interest that we're paying to be able to use that money. And so how do we calculate that? How do we calculate that? We have our payment number 1, and we know that we've borrowed $120,000, right? We've borrowed $120,000, and we're going to think about this in terms of simple interest. And so for this first interest payment, I owe, and so this is, here, we'll kind of make a little separate color for payment 1. So I owe $120,000 at the beginning of this. The interest rate for that month equals the interest rate, which I believe was 4.5%, right? Let's scroll up here. Yeah, it was 4.5%, so 0.045, 0.045. But we're talking about this month, not the whole year. That's a yearly rate, so I need to divide that by 12 to get my monthly rate. So I got 0.045 divided by 12. And so now I really have my monthly rate is 0.00375. Okay, so I owe $120,000. And I have a monthly interest rate. And I'm talking about 1 month. So that sounds like my interest is going to equal my rate times my principal. My principal times my rate. I've got a monthly interest rate. I'm going for 1 month. So really I do have a time here, but my time is in months, and I'm going for 1 month. So t equals 1. So I'm not actually going to write that down, because 1 times anything is the anything. Well, so that means that I have 120,000 times, this is 0.00375. All right, 120, 123 times 0.00375. So that means that $450 that I pay, $450 of interest to borrow that $120,000 for 1 month. But I paid in $608. I know my payment that I calculated was $608 per month. And so of that $608, $450 of that goes towards the interest, goes towards the rental of that $120,000. Well, there's some left over, though. And the leftover bit of my payment goes into the principal, goes into paying down the principal of my loan. And so the principal payment for that month is the $608 minus the $450. And so it's my PMT minus the interest for the month. Okay, well, let's get that number. It's going to be 158, 608 minus 450. Oh, 203. I was off by 50. Silly me. That's why we go ahead and type it in and double check. And yeah, wait. No, I messed up. I messed up my typing. 608 minus 450. I was right. Makes me happy. Okay, 158. And so when I go back up here to this principal part, I put in that $158 actually went into paying down the principal. It's kind of a depressingly small number if you think about it, because, well, just think percentage-wise. 200 would be, about 30% of 600, and 158, significantly less than that. So less than a third, well less than a third of the payment is going towards the principal and reducing the value of the loan. What is my loan balance? Well, the interest, that was paid to rent the $120,000. That doesn't actually count against the loan. That's not money that's paid into reducing the value of the loan. The principal, that's what's paid into reducing the value of the loan. And so my loan balance is that $120,000 that we started the month with minus the $158. And so if I do that 120, 123 minus 158, I get 119, 842. And so up here, I put in 119, 842. All right, we just did the first payment. It asked us to do 3 payments, right? 3 months. And so let's go ahead and do payment number 2. May not do all 3 for the sake of the length of the video, because there's one more thing I want to do in here to show you a faster way to do this. I want to show you how to do it by hand, but I also want to show you how to do this with a piece of software that most people have, or at least have access to something similar to. All right, well, what's different about month 2's calculation from month 1's calculation? Month 2's calculation, I still need interest. I need to find out how much rental I pay. So I'm going to look at this calculation, but instead of $120,000, which is what I owed at the beginning of that month, I'm going to put in the $119,842, because that's how much I owe now. I don't owe $120,000 anymore. I paid off $158. Woohoo! No, sorry, drop in the bucket. Every drop counts, though, and that's what we're going to see here as we keep going forward. What I'm going to do here is let's change colors and get our payment to number 2. So my interest, that's going to be the same. I equals PR times 1 month, but 1 month is just 1 in this case, because I've converted that to a monthly interest rate. And now I've got 120, not 120,000. Almost fell into my own trap there. Sadly, it was not for educational purposes. I'd love to claim that, but no, that was just me being absent-minded. 119,842. And then that's going to be times my 0.00375. All right, so I'm going to have my answer times 0.00375. And that's going to tell me that I owe $449.41. What's interesting about that? $450 was what I owed last time. $449.41 is what I owe this time. It's kind of predictable. Slightly less interest owed because I've borrowed slightly less money. And so I'm renting slightly less money, so I have slightly less interest owed. And so I would expect that for this number, what is it, 449.4. No, 41, wasn't it? Yeah, 41. Try to make that more legible. There we go. Maybe I succeeded, maybe I didn't. All right. Well, now what do? I go to that 608, so if I want to find the principal part, that's the interest part of the payment. This is the principal part of the payment. And so I say I take that 608, and I subtract the 449.41, And so 608 minus 449.41, and I'm going to get 158.59. So if I go up here, I have 158.59. Make that look like a 59. You also notice that if I add those two together, I get 608, which is my payment, right? I add those two together, I get 608. Good. Partially because, that's the subtraction I did to get it. But the other thing is that that's my payment. It should be the same every month, right? For a fixed interest rate like this. Okay, so now the question is, what's my loan balance? It's certainly not 119,842. Something has been paid into the principal, and it's this 158.59 that then gets paid into this. And so at the end of the month, my loan balance is my 119,842 minus the 158.59. And so my loan balance is going to be that. I've lost the number. 119,842. 119,842 minus the 158.59. All right, so 119,842 subtract 158.59. Hit enter, and I get that equals 119,683.41. So I have 119,683.41. And you can kind of see the pattern. After having done it this one time to get this second row, you can kind of see the pattern. We'll go ahead and quickly fill in the third row just because that's what it asks, and it's probably good practice and good to see where this is coming from. What do I need to do this time? I need to find the interest that I'm going to pay on this loan balance for a month. Well, if I don't really even have to write all the pieces down at this point, I can say that I'm going to be paying the 0.0, what was it, 0.0375 for my interest rate. And then I'm going to multiply that by my loan balance, which is the 119.683, not point, 119,683.41. Okay, and that's going to tell me how much interest I owe on that for this month, and predictably it's a slightly smaller number than last month. So now I have $448.81, and so now I do my 608 minus that answer, 448.81. That's going to give me 159. Again, slightly more of my payment is going into principal than the last month because I rented slightly less money for that month. So from that fixed payment, slightly more of that fixed payment can go into the principal rather than the interest. Okay, well, now to find that final loan, I take my loan balance and I subtract from it the principal. So I take that 119.683, figure that out, 119,683.41, my last loan balance, and I subtract the principal, 159.19, enter, and I get 119,524.22. And so while you might feel like you're paying $608 towards your loan every month, and you are paying $608 towards your loan every month, these first months, the lion's share of the payment is going towards interest rather than principal. Now, as we get further and further along, you're getting less and less money. At some point, it crosses, and you start paying more principal than interest, and you actually get to see kind of an acceleration in that change. All right, let's take the same loan and let's do what's called an amortization schedule. Well, the same amortization schedule, but let's do it in Excel. Most people have access to either Excel or OpenOffice, and while I haven't tested the formulas in OpenOffice, I'm sure that there are very similar financial formulas in OpenOffice to let us do this. Okay, so if I go over to Excel for a second, and this really isn't part of our math class, this is just part of, this is a better way to do this if you were actually trying to figure out what your payments would be. Let me get our numbers again. So my principal, that was $120,000. My rate, that was 0.045 divided by 12. And I'm actually not gonna do that yet. I'm gonna do that a slightly different way. My N was 12, and my time in years, oops, I really shouldn't do it that way. I should do N equals and then put the 12 in the next cell because of the way Excel works. And my time in years, that's gonna be a 30-year mortgage. All right, and so now I'm gonna kind of put N as a column header. I'm gonna put interest as a column header. I'm gonna put principal. And then I'm gonna put, what was that, loan balance. I'm actually gonna do something slightly different here. I'm gonna put loan balance 1 up here because I'm gonna have my 0-month loan balance equal my initial payment value. And that's something that Excel does very nicely, is that I can reference other cells. So you just saw what I did is I clicked on a cell, I hit equals, and then I clicked on another cell, and basically whatever value's in this cell now is the value that this cell has in it. It's a convenient way to work with numbers. And so there's a couple of things I need to do. I need to calculate my payment, so my PMT equals, and then I'm gonna hit equals, and then I'm gonna type in PMT, because there's a formula for calculating my payment. Wanted to show, because this will show me my rate, my N per, that's our N, number of periods. Actually, that's our total number of periods. Our PV is our principal value. Our FV would be if we didn't want to pay it all the way down to 0, we could put that in. We're actually not going to include that input because its default is 0, and we want to pay this loan all the way off. Who wants to carry a mortgage indefinitely, right? And then type is, do you pay at the beginning of the month or the end of the month? And by default, it pays at the end of the month. So we're gonna leave these last 2 inputs off. All we really care about is the rate, the total number of periods, and my principal value. Now, I am going to kind of escape out of this for a second because we didn't calculate total number of periods, and so my N per, according to them, that's going to be my number of periods per year times my number of years, 360. All right, so now I'm going to have equals PMT. I want them to go ahead and give us the guidance, so we'll go ahead and do that. And then for my rate, I'm going to choose, still want that monthly rate, right? I still need that monthly rate. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to escape out of this one more time. And I'm going to, over here, I'm going to make a rate that's divided by my N, because that'll give me a periodic rate. The reason I'm doing that is because now if I change how many periods, or I change this to quarterly payments or something like that, it automatically changes this. There's a thing in coding, and Excel is actually pretty close to coding, and it says that you hard code, or you specify as few numbers, as few variables as possible, because you always want things to be adjusting. When you adjust a hard-coded number, you want everything else to adjust. And that's what Excel is going to do nicely for us here in a second. All right, so I want my rate. So I want that monthly rate. I want my total number of periods. So I'm going to hit comma. And then I'm going to hit my total number of periods. And then I want my previous value. And then I'm going to close parentheses because I don't want to talk about the rest of that. Oh, it's going to get mad because it did have the rest of that. So I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to backspace out the rest of that. All right. And with Excel does a funny thing. That red type means it's a negative number, so it's an outgoing value. And so that red type literally means that number is negative. They're just showing it to us because of its financial display, its financial font settings. That red means that's a negative number. It's an outgoing number. It's a payment out. Okay, well, that 608 looks a lot like what we got when we did the math just a minute ago. Now, when we did this, we stopped at 3. Well, when I do this, looking for filler, I want, stop that. There we go, 360. Because you saw I had 360 periods. Now, you saw how long it took me to calculate 3 by hand. Imagine how long it would take to calculate 360 by hand. And then think about if there'd be any mistakes that propagated through all of those 360 calculations. There's times the computer really is nicer than the human hand. Okay, well, now, rather than doing that calculation manually, I'm going to do equals and I'm going to do IPMT. Because IPMT tells me the interest part of my payment. Okay, well, I'm going to use the same rate, comma. This time, there's this thing in Excel that we're going to come back to in a second. All right, so I'm going to use the current period, which is B12, I hit comma. I'm going to do the total number of periods is the 360, and then the previous, the principal value is going to be C4, and then I'm not going to specify FV or type, so I'm going to go up here into the formula editor, and I'm going to delete FV and type because I'm going to use the default values for those. Now, you saw me click and drag that down to have it count up to 360. I just chose 1 and 2 to let it know that it was counting up, and then I chose the lower right corner of the box and I drug down, and it took it all the way to 360. Well, if I do that to this formula, every one of these cell references is going to go down 1 each time it goes down. But 3 of those values I want to stay because principal, rate, and imper, they're kind of only stated once. And so in Excel, the way you keep something in exactly the right spot is you put a $sign in front of it. So I'm going to say $D, $5, $5. And so that's the same cell that was selected earlier, but this time when I drag down, it's going to stay there. The reference to it's going to stay there. It won't drag down with the rest of the formula. And I'm going to have to do the same thing to B12 here. No, I don't have to do that to B12 because I want it to drag down, right? I want it to go payment 1, payment 2, payment 3 as I go down. So I'm going to leave B12 alone, but C8, it needs to be static. So I'm going to do $, lost my $sign for a second. Where'd it go? There we go, $, C, $8. All right, so now I'm holding my imper in exactly the right spot. And then my principal min C4 needs to be $C, $4. All right. And so now, hey, that 450 sounds awfully familiar. It sounds like a number we got. And so as I drag that all the way down, what do you expect my last value to be? I'd expect my last value of interest and my last payment, I'd expect it to be really, really small, right? Because I'm renting very little money for that last month. And $227, when you're talking about a $608 payment, that qualifies as really, really small. Okay, now let's do the same thing for the principal part. So I'm going to do equals, I'm going to do PPMT, but instead of that, I'm going to choose that so you get to see these. And I'm going to say my rate is calculated there. My period is, my rate is calculated there, comma. My period is displayed there. Total number of periods is displayed there. My principal value is displayed there. And now I'm going to go back up to my formula editor and stop there and use the defaults. But this C4 I need to be static, so I'm going to say $C $4. And then C8 I need to be static, so I'm going to replace it with $C $8. B12 I want to move around. D5 I want to be static, so I'm going to replace it with $D $5. Okay, 158 sounds very familiar. Now, if I scroll this all the way down, what do I expect the last value in the 360 here to be? I expect it to be really high because, well, for one thing, it has to be the rest of the $608 payment. But also, as we get to the end of this loan, I'm borrowing less money, so I pay less interest, so I'm paying more into principal. So I'm more aggressively paying the loan down, the balance of the loan down. And that gives me my 605.75. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And now comes the loan balance calculation. There's a formula for this, but I almost prefer to do it this way because I kind of like to see the way this goes. And what I'm really going to do is I'm just going to do this loan balance, and then I would do minus, but because that text is red, that means that 158.02 is already negative. So I'm actually going to do plus this because that number is negative. It's a payment out. And so now I have the loan balance is 120. Now I've taken 158 away, and I want both of those to go to drop down with me because in this next one, I want it to be referencing the loan balance above it and then subtracting the 158.61. And so I wanted to do that all the way down the line. And hopefully, at the end, that loan balance is $0. Isn't that a beautiful sight? Got to see that loan balance get paid completely off. Okay, so when I'm calculating the total interest here, it's going to be equals, and quite similarly to before, we're going to say, what is it? It's my payment, and then it's my payment times my total number of periods, right? Because that's how many times I pay that payment in. But remember that red text means that this is a negative number. And so I'm going to put a negative out in front of this because I want to treat this like it's a positive number. Okay, and so now I have, that negative just turns that 608.02 to be a positive number, and then multiplies it by the total number of payments, so that's all the money that I've paid in. And now from that I want to subtract the initial value of the loan. That way I can find out how much interest was actually paid. And fortunately, that number looks really familiar. About $100,000 on a $120,000 loan. Okay, now I want to visualize this. I want to use all these dry numbers. I want to visualize them. Let's see. Is there a good way to do this? We'll just do it with the negative numbers. They'll visualize a little bit differently as negative numbers, but it's not that big a deal. So as I highlight both of these columns, there we go. Highlight both of those columns, and then I go to Insert, and I go to Charts, and I go to Line, and I just choose whatever the easy first chart is here. And I want to move this, yeah, there we go. I want to move this thing around on my screen a little bit here. There we are. And I want to make this a little bit bigger, just to, whoa, not that much bigger. Whatever, a little bit smaller than that. That way I can actually, yeah, there we go. I can actually have everything on the screen at once. And so what we can see here is that this interest part, if this is 0, and I told you these are negative numbers, so because the payment out is considered a negative value. And so my principal payment gets larger and larger and larger as time goes on, right? Because this is the number of payments, this is the number of months that have been passed in the horizontal axis. My interest part of the payment gets smaller and smaller and smaller, it gets closer and closer and closer to $0. And so less and less goes to the rental of the money because I've paid off and I'm renting less and less money. And at some point they cross. You can also see this is not a linear function. There's some acceleration to this payment because as we pay off more and more, we owe less. So we're paying it off faster and faster and faster. Now, what I really wanted to show here, and this is kind of one of those things, math cannot make value judgments. Math can inform you to make value judgments, but math cannot make value judgments. You have to make those on your own from your own value system. All math can do is tell you that something is expensive or something is less expensive. And in this case, we're going to take a look at these mortgage timelines. Now, for this 30-year mortgage, we kind of had that sticker shock of, wait a minute, I only borrowed $120,000 and I'm paying $98,888 in interest. What if I took that 30-year mortgage and turned it into a 15-year mortgage? It's one of the beautiful things about a program like Excel is if I change this number, the way I did these cells, it's going to trickle down and all of the other calculations are going to change. So when I do that, you notice that my 360-month timeline became a 180-month timeline. That's why things cut off here. If I do that, my total interest paid, that's a much nicer number, right? Like $40,000 less interest. All because I chose a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage. I'm saving $40,000 in interest. $43,000 in interest? Well, it kind of makes sense. I'm borrowing the money for half the length of time, so I'm paying about half as much interest. So there's a lot of logic in there. But there's this other thing. I wish that came for free. But everything in life has a trade-off, and everything in math has a trade-off. When I turned that from 15 years down to 30, watch what else changes when I go back to 30 years. That payment went from $608 up to $917. And so I can't tell you which one's best for you or your family. What I can tell you is that if you choose a 15-year mortgage, you're going to pay a lot less in interest. The problem is that your monthly payment's significantly higher. And so what you have to figure out is, according to your value system and what you're able to earn, which mortgage is better for you and your family. But it's always better to make an informed decision than to just roll the dice. And so it's always better to choose the 15-year mortgage or the 30-year mortgage, to choose the harder route of the 15-year mortgage to save money. If you can do it, it will save you a significant amount of interest. If it's too much, then the other option is there. It's available, but it's just one of those things. It's a balance, and it's something you have to choose. You have to make the right decision for you. All right. I hope that helps us with the math for the amortization schedules that we are going to be doing by hand. We'll be doing 1 or 2 or 3 rows of amortization schedules by hand. And then I don't expect you to be able to recreate this from Excel, but this is a much more real-world way of doing this because you're not doing 360 lines of that amortization schedule by hand. All right. I hope that helps, and I hope this video is useful to you all.